The woman who would soon become the center of everyone's attention was the same person they had barely noticed for years. Every morning before sunrise, Nurse Leora Vance walked to the front doors of Brookhaven Regional Hospital, carrying the same faded lunch bag and a plain navy jacket. She never arrived late. She never rushed. She simply nodded to the security guard, smiled politely, and disappeared into another 12-hour shift as if the building itself depended on her quiet routine. Most people knew her face. Very few knew anything else. She wasn't the loudest nurse. She didn't tell long stories during lunch breaks or complain after difficult shifts. She listened more than she spoke. If someone needed help lifting a patient or covering an extra hour, Leora was already there before anyone asked. "Morning, Leora." One of the reception clerks called. "Good morning," she answered with a gentle smile. That was usually the entire conversation. Inside the emergency department, the waiting room was already filling with people. A teenager held a towel against a bleeding hand. An elderly couple sat silently together. A mother rocked her feverish little boy while checking the clock every few seconds. Another ordinary day, or so everyone believed. Leora tied her hair back, clipped on her badge, and began checking supplies. "Gauze is running low again." Another nurse, Tessa, sighed. "I'll restock it," Leora replied. "You always beat me to it." Leora only smiled. Within minutes, the first ambulance arrived. Paramedics wheeled in a construction worker who had fallen from scaffolding. Doctors rushed toward the trauma room, while nurses surrounded the stretcher, blood pressure dropping. "Get another 4. Call radiology." The room buzzed with controlled urgency. Leora moved through the crowd almost silently. She handed instruments before anyone asked. She adjusted oxygen levels with quick, practiced hands. She noticed tiny details others overlooked. When one monitor flashed an unusual rhythm, she calmly leaned toward the attending physician. "I think we should check for internal bleeding higher than expected." The doctor glanced at the screen. "What makes you think that?" "The bruising pattern doesn't match the first scan." There was no pride in her voice, only quiet certainty. The physician hesitated for just a second before ordering another scan. 20 minutes later, the imaging confirmed exactly what she had suspected. The surgeon looked over with surprise. "Good catch." Leora simply nodded and continued cleaning equipment. By lunchtime, nobody was talking about her observation anymore. The patient was stable. Another crisis had passed. Another day continued. That was how things always worked. She helped save lives without ever becoming part of the story. Later that afternoon, a local firefighter named Owen was brought into the emergency room after inhaling smoke during a warehouse fire. He joked with everyone despite coughing every few sentences. "I've had better Tuesdays," he laughed weakly. Leora checked his oxygen mask. "You'll probably have better Wednesdays, too." He chuckled. "Now that's optimism." She smiled without answering. Even frightened patients seemed calmer around her. She never rushed them, never spoke louder than necessary, never made promises she couldn't keep. Instead, she looked people in the eyes and spoke honestly. "We're here. We'll take good care of you. You're not alone." Simple words, but somehow they carried weight. Across the hall, veteran paramedic Rowan Keene watched her while finishing paperwork. He had worked emergency calls for nearly 25 years. Experience taught him to recognize calm under pressure. Leora wasn't just calm. She was different. During emergencies, nothing seemed to surprise her. Equipment failures, multiple trauma patients, power flickers, mass casualty drills. While others became louder, she became quieter, more focused, almost as if chaos slowed down around her. Rowan mentioned it while grabbing coffee. "You've seen things before." Leora looked up from her chart. "What do you mean?" "You don't react like someone who's only worked hospitals." She stirred her tea. "I've just been doing this a long time." He studied her expression. There was no nervousness, no defensiveness, just a careful answer. "I suppose experience teaches everyone something," she added. Rowan nodded slowly. Maybe, but he wasn't convinced. A few hours later, another ambulance arrived carrying a 7-year-old boy struggling to breathe. His mother ran beside the stretcher, crying, Please save him. Doctors immediately suspected a severe allergic reaction. Medication was prepared. Monitors beeped. Everyone moved quickly as a physician reached for one treatment. Leora noticed something almost invisible. Tiny purple spots behind the child's ears. His fingertips. The pattern didn't fit. She leaned close. Doctor, he looked over. I think we're missing something. What? He was sick before today, wasn't he? She gently asked the frightened mother. The woman wiped away tears. Yes. He had a fever 2 days ago. Any neck pain? I think so. Leora met the doctor's eyes. It may not be an allergy. Without hesitation, the physician changed course. More tests, different medication, different specialists. The diagnosis came back less than 30 minutes later. A dangerous infection. Treatment started immediately. The infectious disease specialist later admitted another hour could have changed everything. The child's condition slowly improved. His mother hugged the physician through tears. Thank you so much. The doctor accepted the gratitude. He glanced toward Leora across the room. She was quietly replacing used supplies. He started walking toward her. You should... She interrupted with a tiny shake of her head. The important thing is that he's okay. Nothing more needed to be said. By evening, the hospital settled into its usual rhythm. Visitors headed home. Cleaning crews rolled carts through the hallways. Night staff began arriving. Leora stepped into the employee locker room to change into a fresh scrub top after a long shift. As she reached into her locker, a small silver chain slipped from beneath her collar. Hanging from it was an old military-style pendant. Its edges were worn smooth from years of use. She held it for only a second. Her thumb brushed across the faded engraving. Then she quietly tucked it back beneath her uniform before anyone could see. Outside the staff entrance, a low rumble drifted across the evening sky. Most people ignored it. Hospitals were noisy places. Helicopters came and went. But this sound was different. Deeper. Heavier. Leora stopped walking. For the first time all day, something changed in her expression. Not fear, recognition. Across the parking lot, Rowan noticed her standing completely still. You okay? He called. She looked toward the horizon where dark shapes slowly appeared beyond the trees. The sound grew louder, closer. Every conversation outside the hospital faded as dozens of eyes turned upward. Then someone whispered words that made the entire entrance fall silent. Why is there a black helicopter coming here? The helicopter didn't circle the hospital or continue toward another destination. It came straight down. Its powerful rotors pushed dust and loose leaves across the parking lot as employees shielded their faces. Visitors stopped walking. Patients standing near the windows pressed closer to the glass. Within seconds, the quiet evening outside Brookhaven Regional Hospital had turned into a scene no one could explain. Leora never took her eyes off the aircraft. Her breathing stayed steady, but her fingers slowly tightened around the strap of her lunch bag. Rowan stepped beside her. Do you know what's going on? She answered without looking away. I don't know. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. The helicopter settled onto the landing area with practiced precision. It was matte black, carrying no large markings that anyone immediately recognized. The engine continued humming as the side door slid open. 3 uniformed personnel stepped onto the pavement. Their movements were calm and organized. No one ran. No one shouted. One of them carried a small folder tucked beneath his arm. Hospital security hurried toward them, while curious staff gathered several yards away. The lead officer stopped at the entrance. We're looking for Nurse Leora Vance. The word seemed to freeze the entire crowd. The security supervisor blinked. I'm sorry, who? Nurse Leora Vance. Several nurses exchanged confused looks. Tessa quietly whispered, They're asking for Leora? The hospital administrator, Denise Holloway, walked outside after hearing the commotion. I'm the evening administrator. May I ask what this is regarding? I'm afraid we can't discuss operational details. Is she in trouble? No. Is this some kind of investigation? The officer shook his head. No, ma'am. Denise looked even more puzzled. Then why would a military helicopter come for one of our nurses? The officer simply repeated himself. We need to speak with Nurse Leora Vance immediately. Dozens of eyes turned toward Leora. For years she had blended into the background. Now she stood in complete silence while everyone waited. She slowly stepped forward. I'm Leora. The officer studied her face for only a moment before giving a respectful nod. It has been a long time. She looked carefully at the insignia stitched onto his uniform. Recognition flashed across her face. So it's your unit? Yes. Neither of them smiled. Neither offered an explanation. The brief exchange only deepened everyone's confusion. Rowan folded his arms. You've met before. Leora, remain quiet. The officer spoke again. We apologize for arriving without notice. She asked softly, is it serious? Very. A long pause settled between them. Finally, she asked a question no one else understood. How much time do we have? Not much. The answer landed heavily. Denise stepped closer. I need to know what's happening before one of my nurses leaves with strangers. The officer reached into his folder and handed her an official document. She scanned the page. Her expression changed immediately. I understand. She looked at Leora. They've been fully cleared. The document carried enough authority to end every question. Still, curiosity spread through the crowd. Tessa couldn't hold back. Leora, what's going on? Leora looked at her friend with an apologetic smile. I wish I could explain. You really know these people? Yes. You were in the military? Leora hesitated. For a while. The simple answer stunned everyone. No one had ever imagined it. Not once had she mentioned military service. Not during late-night coffee breaks. Not during holiday parties. Not even when veterans shared stories in the emergency room. She had listened quietly every time, never adding her own. Rowan looked at her with new eyes. So that's why. She tilted her head. Why what? You never panic. She gave a faint smile. Everyone panics. You don't. I've learned not to show it. For a brief second, Rowan realized how little he actually knew about the woman who had worked beside him for nearly 4 years. The officer glanced toward the helicopter. We need to leave soon. Leora nodded but didn't move. Instead, she turned toward the hospital entrance. There are patients waiting. Denise stepped closer. We'll cover your shift. I still need to hand over my charts. I'll take care of them. Another nurse gently touched Leora's shoulder. Go. She quietly thanked everyone before walking back inside. The emergency department felt strangely normal compared to the scene outside. Phones rang. Monitors beeped. Patients waited. Life continued. Leora moved through the hallway one last time, updating medical notes with careful handwriting. She checked on the little boy whose life had been saved earlier. He was sitting up in bed, smiling weakly while coloring with crayons. His mother noticed her. I've been looking for you. Leora smiled. How's he feeling? So much better. The woman stood and hugged her before Leora could react. Thank you. You should thank the whole team. I know what the doctor told me. Leora gently squeezed her shoulder. He still has a few days to recover, but he's doing well. The little boy looked up. Are you leaving? For a little while. Will you come back? She smiled. I hope so. As she walked away, her smile slowly faded. She entered the locker room alone. The old pendant rested in her palm again. This time she stared at it longer. Years seemed to pass across her face in silence. Memories she had carefully buried pressed against the edges of her thoughts. A loud knock interrupted them. The helicopter's waiting. Someone called. She slipped the pendant beneath her uniform and closed the locker. Outside, nearly the entire evening staff had gathered near the entrance. Nobody spoke. Even patients watched from upper-floor windows. Leora crossed the parking lot with slow, steady steps. Before climbing aboard, she turned toward her co-workers. I'll see you soon. Tessa forced a smile. You'd better. Rowan stepped closer. When this is over... She looked at him. I'd like to hear your story. She considered his words. Maybe. It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't a refusal. The officer helped her into the helicopter. As the door began sliding shut, Denise suddenly called out, "One last question." The officer paused. "Why her?" For the first time since arriving, the officer allowed himself the smallest smile. Because when every other option has failed. He looked directly at Leora before finishing the sentence. "She's the person our people trust to save lives." The door closed. The helicopter lifted into the darkening sky. Far below, dozens of stunned hospital employees watched until it disappeared beyond the clouds. Inside the aircraft, no one spoke for several minutes. Then the officer placed a sealed file in Leora's hands. She slowly opened it. The first photograph made the color drain from her face. Barely above a whisper, she said words no one else in the cabin expected to hear. "That's impossible. I thought he died years ago." The photograph should not have existed. Leora stared at it without blinking. The man in the picture looked older than she remembered, with more gray in his hair and deeper lines across his face. But there was no mistake. It was Commander Alden Cross. The last time she had seen him, smoke had filled a mountain valley where their evacuation team had been trapped. She had stayed beside him until another medic pulled her toward the final helicopter. Behind her, the hillside had disappeared beneath a cloud of dust and falling rock. She had believed no one could have survived. For years, she had carried that memory like a stone. Now his face was looking back at her from a recent photograph. The officer sitting across from her noticed her reaction. "You recognize him?" She slowly closed the folder. "I buried that memory a long time ago. He never forgot yours." The helicopter continued through the night, its steady vibration filling the silence. Leora finally asked, "How is he still alive?" The officer leaned back. "After you left, another extraction team reached the area several hours later. They found him unconscious, but alive." She lowered her eyes. "No one ever told me. The mission remained classified, so I spent all these years believing." She stopped herself. The officer finished the sentence quietly. "Believing he died." Neither of them spoke for several moments. Outside the window, only darkness stretched beneath the aircraft. Finally, Leora opened the folder again. Medical reports, scan results, vital signs, several handwritten notes. At the very top was a single request. Patient specifically requested Nurse Leora Vance. She frowned. "Why me?" "Because he trusts you. There are surgeons with far more experience. Maybe there are trauma specialists working at larger hospitals. There are." She looked up. "So why bring me?" The officer answered without hesitation. "Because he refused everyone else." Leora shook her head slightly. "That doesn't make sense." "It does to him." The helicopter began descending. Lights appeared below, scattered across a heavily secured medical campus, surrounded by tall fences and quiet buildings. Unlike a busy public hospital, this place felt almost peaceful. The aircraft landed beside a modern trauma center. As soon as the rotors slowed, another medical team was already waiting. A woman wearing surgical scrubs approached. "You're Nurse Vance?" "Yes." "I'm Dr. Celeste Rowan." They shook hands. "Thank you for coming." Leora looked toward the building. "How bad is it?" Dr. Rowan sighed. "He suffered major internal injuries after an aircraft accident during a humanitarian relief mission 3 days ago. 3 days? He remained stable long enough to be transported here. Why wait until now?" "We didn't." Dr. Rowan looked directly into her eyes. "We've already tried." Those words carried more weight than any medical report. Inside the secure hospital, the hallways were calm but focused. Staff members moved quickly without unnecessary conversation. Leora noticed something immediately. Every person she passed seemed highly trained. No one wasted movement. No one raised their voice. The discipline reminded her of another life she had tried to leave behind. They entered a conference room where medical images covered several large monitors. Dr. Rowan pointed toward them. "Our surgeons have reviewed everything." Another physician joined them. "We can operate." "But," Leora asked. The doctor folded his arms. "But his condition is extremely complicated." Leora studied the scans. She didn't speak for nearly a minute. Then she stepped closer. Has anyone looked at this angle? The room became quiet. Dr. Rowan followed her finger. What do you see? The damage isn't spreading the way we'd expect. She pointed again. Something's protecting this section. Another surgeon adjusted the image. After several seconds, his eyebrows lifted. I didn't notice that. Neither had anyone else. The room suddenly felt different. No one questioned why she had been called anymore. They simply listened. Leora continued examining every scan. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't competing. She simply looked at problems differently. Years of treating injured people in places with limited equipment had taught her to notice small details others sometimes overlooked. Dr. Rowan quietly smiled. I understand now. Leora barely heard her. She was already thinking about the patient waiting upstairs. Can I see him? The doctors exchanged brief glances. Then one nodded. They led her through another hallway before stopping outside a guarded intensive care room. The officer who had flown with her remained outside. This is as far as I go. Leora took a slow breath before entering. The room was dimly lit. Machines hummed softly. Commander Alden Cross lay peacefully beneath warm blankets, surrounded by monitors and carefully organized equipment. Time had changed him, but not enough. She recognized him immediately. She walked closer until she stood beside the bed. For several seconds, she simply watched him breathe. I really thought you were gone, she whispered. His eyes remained closed. One hand rested beside the blanket. Without thinking, she gently adjusted the pulse sensor that had shifted slightly. The movement was automatic, the same quiet care she showed every patient. Dr. Rowan spoke softly behind her. He drifts in and out of consciousness. Leora nodded. She looked around the room. On a nearby table sat an old metal compass. She recognized it instantly. Years earlier, during one freezing night in the mountains, Alden had joked that he trusted that compass more than any map. You kept it, she whispered. Dr. Rowan looked surprised. You've seen it before? Leora smiled faintly. A long time ago. Just then, the monitor showed a slight change. Alden's fingers moved. Very slowly, his eyes opened. They searched the room without focus. Then they stopped. On her. His breathing caught for just a moment. A tired smile appeared. I knew, he whispered weakly. Leora stepped closer. Don't try to talk. You came. She nodded. I'm here. His voice was barely audible. I told them. Only you. She struggled to answer. You should have asked for one of the surgeons. He gave the smallest shake of his head. No. His hand reached weakly toward hers. You always found a way. Tears gathered in Leora's eyes. But she blinked them away before they could fall. Before she could respond, alarm suddenly sounded from one of the monitors. The medical team rushed into the room. A nurse looked at the screen. Doctor, his condition is changing. Dr. Rowan checked the readings, then looked at Leora with growing concern. We don't have the luxury of waiting until morning. She turned toward the surgical team gathering outside. We're taking him into surgery. She paused for one critical moment before finishing the sentence. And Nurse Vance is coming with us. The operating room became quiet the moment Leora walked inside. No one questioned why a hospital nurse from a regional medical center had been invited into one of the country's most secure surgical facilities. They had already seen how she studied the scans, how she noticed details others had missed, and how Commander Alden Cross had asked for her by name. The room was bright and carefully organized. Every instrument was in place. Every member of the team knew their role. Dr. Celeste Rowan looked around the room. Let's stay focused. We know what we're facing. Everyone nodded. Leora scrubbed in without saying a word. Her movements were smooth and familiar, as though she had done this hundreds of times before. One of the younger surgical nurses quietly watched her. You've worked trauma before, haven't you? Leora adjusted her gloves. For a while. The nurse smiled. I had a feeling. Moments later, Alden was brought into the operating room. Though heavily sedated, his vital signs remained unstable. The anesthesiologist gave a calm update. We're ready. Dr. Rowan looked toward Leora. If you notice anything, speak immediately. I will. The procedure began. The room settled into its rhythm. Monitors beeped steadily. Surgical lights reflected from polished steel instruments. No one wasted a single motion. For the first 20 minutes, everything progressed according to plan. Then one monitor gave a sharp warning tone. A technician looked up. We've lost one of the imaging feeds. Dr. Rowan didn't panic. Can we restore it? I'm trying. The screen flickered, returned, then went dark again. Leora stepped closer to another monitor. We still have enough information. Dr. Rowan nodded. Agreed. The operation continued. A few minutes later, another complication appeared. The patient's blood pressure began drifting lower than expected. The anesthesiologist adjusted medication. It's responding slowly. Dr. Rowan studied the surgical field. I don't like this. Neither did Leora. She quietly watched every movement, every number, every sound. Years earlier, she had learned something during humanitarian missions in remote areas. Technology was valuable, but people depended too heavily on it. Machines could fail. Training could not. She leaned slightly toward Dr. Rowan. The tissue isn't reacting the way the scan predicted. What do you mean? I think the swelling has shifted. Dr. Rowan paused. Another surgeon looked over. You think the pressure moved? Yes. The surgeon examined the area again. After several tense seconds, he nodded. She's right. Dr. Rowan carefully adjusted the plan. The change was small, but almost immediately the patient's readings became more stable. One of the younger doctors quietly exhaled. That helped. Leora stepped back again. She never tried to take control. She simply stayed observant. Nearly an hour passed. The most difficult portion of the procedure approached. Everyone in the room understood it. Dr. Rowan looked toward her team. This is where we have to be exact. The room became even quieter. Outside the operating room, officers and medical staff waited without speaking. The officer who had flown Leora there stood beside the window, watching every person who entered or left. Nobody asked him questions anymore. They already knew the patient mattered. Inside, another warning light flashed. A surgical suction unit suddenly stopped working. The circulating nurse checked the connections. No response. Backup. Bringing it. The replacement unit arrived, but connecting it would cost valuable time. Leora immediately reached for a manual backup system stored beneath one of the carts. The younger nurse looked surprised. I didn't even know we had one. Leora handed it over. Every operating room should. The manual system worked exactly as intended. It wasn't as convenient, but it allowed the surgeons to continue without interruption. Dr. Rowan glanced at Leora. Good thinking. Leora simply nodded. There wasn't time for conversation. Another 30 minutes passed. Finally, the most difficult repair was complete. Dr. Rowan slowly stepped back. I think we've crossed the hardest part. No one celebrated. Not yet. Recovery still depended on the next several minutes. The monitors remained steady. Then, unexpectedly, Alden's heart rhythm changed. Not dangerously. Just enough to catch everyone's attention. The anesthesiologist checked the readings. He's responding. Leora looked at the monitor. He can hear us. The doctor blinked. You think so? I've seen it before. Dr. Rowan leaned closer to the patient. Commander Cross. There was no movement. Leora stepped beside the bed. Her voice remained soft. Alden. The rhythm steadied. Dr. Rowan looked up. Interesting. Leora smiled faintly. He always ignored formal titles. A few members of the team laughed quietly. The tension eased just enough for everyone to breathe again. Hours after entering the operating room, Dr. Rowan finally removed her gloves. We're finished. The words felt almost unreal. The patient was alive. Stable. Still facing recovery. But alive. As nurses prepared to transfer him to intensive care, Leora quietly began cleaning her workstation. The younger nurse stopped her. You saved us several times today. We all did. No. The nurse shook her head. You noticed things the rest of us missed. Leora smiled politely. Medicine has never been about proving who's smartest. She removed her surgical cap. It's about giving people another tomorrow. Dr. Rowan overheard her, so that's why he trusted you. Leora looked toward the hallway where Alden's bed was being rolled away. I don't know why he trusted me. I do. Dr. Rowan folded her arms. He believed you'd never stop looking for another answer. Leora lowered her eyes. Years of guilt still lingered inside her. I didn't save everyone. No one does. She remained silent. Dr. Rowan stepped closer. Whatever happened years ago? Leora finally spoke. I left believing I failed him. You didn't. I thought I watched him die. You gave him the chance to survive. Those words settled deeply. For the first time in years, Leora allowed herself to believe they might be true. Later that evening, she quietly gathered her belongings. No cameras waited. No reporters stood outside. No celebration filled the halls. She preferred it that way. As she reached the exit, the officer approached. Before you leave, he handed her a folded note. He asked us to give you this if the surgery was successful. Leora unfolded the paper. Only one handwritten sentence appeared inside. Meet me when I wake up. There's something you deserve to know. She stared at the words for several seconds. Then the officer added one final sentence. And there's someone else who's been waiting years to thank you. Leora slowly looked up. Who? The officer's expression softened. I think you'll recognize her the moment you see her. The answer she had waited years to hear was finally only a few steps away. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows of the recovery wing. The tension that had filled the hospital overnight had faded into quiet conversations and cautious optimism. Doctors reviewed charts, nurses checked medications, and families waited with hopeful expressions. Leora stood outside Commander Alden Cross's room, holding the folded note in one hand. She took a slow breath before gently knocking. A familiar voice answered from inside. Come in. She opened the door. Alden was sitting up in bed, looking tired but far stronger than he had the night before. His color had returned, and for the first time, he smiled without effort. I wasn't sure you'd stay long enough. Leora walked closer. I almost didn't. I know. She pulled a chair beside the bed. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Years of unanswered questions filled the silence. Finally, Alden broke it. You've blamed yourself all this time. She looked down. I left you there. You followed my order. I still left. You carried 3 injured civilians onto that helicopter before anyone else. Her eyes remained fixed on the floor. I thought I chose the wrong person. Alden shook his head. There was no wrong choice. She slowly looked at him. The rescue team reached me hours later. I never knew. They found me because you marked my location. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. The emergency beacon? He nodded. You activated it before you left. I barely remember doing it. I do. A quiet smile crossed his face. That little decision gave me another 12 years. Leora closed her eyes for a moment. The weight she had carried for so long finally began to lift. I've replayed that day thousands of times. I know. I always thought I failed. Alden leaned forward as much as his recovery allowed. You didn't fail me. His voice remained calm. You saved everyone you could. A soft knock interrupted them. The same officer who had flown her there stepped inside. They're ready. Leora looked confused. Ready for what? You'll see. Alden smiled. You've avoided attention your entire life. I prefer that way. Not today. She followed the officer through several hallways until they reached a modest conference room. It wasn't filled with reporters or cameras. Instead, about 30 people stood, quietly waiting. Doctors, military personnel, several nurses from the secure medical center. To Leora's surprise, familiar faces from Brookhaven Regional Hospital were there too. Tessa spotted her first. There she is. Rowan smiled. Told you there was a story. Hospital Administrator Denise walked over. You disappeared without explaining anything. I know. We figured you had a good reason. Leora laughed softly. I suppose I did. At the front of the room stood a small podium and a single display case. Inside rested a medal. The officer addressed the room. Many years ago, a humanitarian medical mission remained classified due to location and circumstances involved. Everyone listened quietly. Several members of that mission received public recognition. He paused. One person never did. His eyes turned toward Leora. Because her role remained confidential, Leora immediately shook her head. This isn't necessary. Alden slowly entered the room with the help of a physical therapist. It is. Every person stood. He walked carefully until he reached the front. I've spent years waiting for the chance to do this. He looked directly at Leora. When people tell the story of that mission, they usually remember the helicopters. A few people smiled. They remember the evacuation. He paused. I remember the nurse. The room became perfectly still. You carried frightened children before carrying yourself. You treated strangers before treating your own injuries. You stayed calm while everyone else believed hope was disappearing. Leora's eyes filled with tears. I wasn't the only one. No. Alden smiled warmly. But you're the one who kept reminding everyone that every life mattered. He carefully lifted the medal from the display. I know you'll probably hide this in a drawer. A few people laughed quietly, but that doesn't change what it represents. He handed it to her. She accepted it with trembling hands. I don't know what to say. Then, don't. He looked around the room. Just let people finally know who you are. After the small ceremony ended, conversations filled the room. Tessa walked over first. You really never mentioned any of this. Leora smiled. It wasn't the part of my life that mattered most. Rowan crossed his arms. So, what part mattered most? She answered without hesitation. The patients waiting back home. A week later, Leora returned to Brookhaven Regional Hospital. There were no banners hanging outside, no television crews. Just a familiar smell of coffee in the staff lounge and the sound of monitors echoing through the emergency department. The security guard greeted her exactly as always. Morning, Leora. She smiled. Morning. Tessa handed her a clipboard. I saved your favorite station. You didn't have to. I wanted to. Several co-workers quietly congratulated her. Others simply smiled with a little more respect than before. Nothing else had changed. And that was exactly how Leora wanted it. Before long, another ambulance arrived. A frightened elderly woman was wheeled into the emergency room, gripping the blanket with shaking hands. I've never been in a hospital before, she whispered. Leora knelt beside her stretcher. You don't have to face it alone. The woman's breathing slowed. She reached out and squeezed Leora's hand. Thank you. Leora smiled with the same quiet kindness she had always carried. The medal remained tucked safely inside her locker, not because she was ashamed of it, because she believed the greatest reward wasn't something worn on a uniform. It was another chance to help someone through the hardest day of their life. As the emergency department settled into its familiar rhythm, Rowan watched her comfort another nervous patient. He smiled to himself. Some heroes arrived with flashing lights and loud applause. Others simply showed up early for work, carried a faded lunch bag, and quietly changed lives without asking anyone to notice. And for Leora Vance, that had always been more than enough.